you gotta talk into me.
I am Jamie, Executive Director of the Roslyn Landmark Society, and I'd like to welcome you all to our first lecture in our 2024 speaker series. Thank you all for being here. As many of you probably already know, our organization was founded in 1961 by Dr. Roger and Peggy Gary during a time when this area was facing due to rapid suburbanization. So the Garys founded the Roslyn Landmark Society in order to preserve the historic structures in this area, Roslyn, and the surrounding communities. So now going on 60 years, the organization has preserved close to 50 historic structures in Roslyn and surrounding areas, and it's all thanks to the ongoing efforts of the Roslyn Landmark Society and you, our wonderful members and supporters. So thank you for being here. We'd also like to thank the Bryant Library and the local history collection for partnering with us on this and hosting this event with us in partnership. If you're interested in learning more about our organization or becoming a member, you can visit our website at roslynlandmarks.org. Also, the Bryant Library, if you visit their website and look for the local history collection, you can find some fantastic historic resources. So I think without further delay, I'd like to introduce our speaker this evening, historian and colonial cooking expert, Diane Schwindt.
Good evening, everyone. I'm speaking with the mic, so I'll probably like louder. We're going to talk about food, and I just 60 houses that were saved through preservation. Safety buildings. You see? So what happens is the buildings are saved. Sometimes they become doctors' offices, sometimes they become libraries and so on. But what happened in them in the beginning of time? The 1700s, while this country was being developed. How did they cook? What foods did they eat? And I'm going to be touching upon a lot of that. The items that you see in front of you in these households. Items like we have a microwave in our house. So these are the items that would have been in those homes that you've saved. So whatever house it is that you're affiliated with, take a moment and just kind of picture what that's like. Most, all those houses had hearths, and these items right here are all pretty much tools and cooking implements that we use during that time period. So I'd like to get started with, sometimes I ask the lights to be turned off, but that would probably be a lot of work. Can you turn the lights off? Okay, don't do it. No, that's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Oh, good, we have some more people. Can you do it or no?
They sit where there are things on the dish.
Sure. Hold them in your hand. We're going to talk about them. Don't worry about the lights. All right, you ready? Fire. Thousands of years we started cooking with fire. The fuel source was anything organic, pretty much wood as time went on. It happened to us as human beings. So we started to cook. We were hunters and gatherers. Humans that would eat like things that were rotting, things that they gathered, and so on. But once they started cooking, does anybody know what happened to the human body?
Easier to digest.
It was easier to digest, but the proteins changed and our brains became bigger. And we started to do critical thinking and thinking. So cooking was a really important part of our development as human beings in thinking. So moving along thousands of years, so we have the wood, and then metal was not really red. I just had dental work done. I apologize, and some words don't come out totally correct. We didn't have metal pots like we have nowadays, and the average person had clay. So we're going back into Europe in the 16th. Oh, Oh, that's great. That's even nicer. Thank you. Now I wish I had some candles. So clay pots. So we're in Europe and there's clay pots and people are cooking in them and clay breaks after a while. It will fail after it's been on a fire for a great, some time. And people are cooking in them and so on. We find in Europe, there's a lot of potters that are in trouble. They go to the side of the road and they take a big piece of clay and they make these clay pots for cooking. People buy them or trade for them. Later on, there's two carts in opposite directions. One cart has to move over and it hits the pot. Here we are thousands of years later or hundreds of years later, and we're still using these terms, but it really has to do with cooking. The pot. From the clay that was gathered to create the pot to cook the meal. All meals were pretty much one pot. They were very simple meals. It was just a small pot that was over a fire. The hearth, okay, well, this is great. I love it when they can accommodate me. So this is a fireplace. The hearth is the floor, not the whole thing. The hearth is the floor. This is the firebox, and then the different components. But the hearth is the floor. So homes had like a hearth in the middle on the floor. The smoke escaped through the middle of the ceiling in the roof. They were outside, then they were inside. Then they were kind of propped into a corner. Then chimneys came and so on. So it's evolution, moving of hearths and places to cook. But the clay pot was pretty much it for a long period of time. As time went on, not this size, bigger. People had these little cauldron pots. And again, everything went into that pot. So if you were cooking a meal and you had whatever your little group, and somebody caught a squirrel or killed a squirrel or a rabbit, that would go in. The pot almost never was cleaned. It just went from one meal to another meal to another meal. And it was just constantly added to. When people came to America, they brought their pots with them, the little cauldrons. Usually I cook on them. They're much bigger than that, but my car, I have a tiny little car, so I use that plus. So the clay pot. 1600s, we have items like this. What about this? Anybody can figure out what that's for? I just used this the other day, actually. Nope. All these items are used on a regular basis. Most of these I still use to cook with. This, I happen to find in an antique store. It's fairly rare, and it's from the early 1700s. To roast fish. So if you look at it later on, there's a little bit of clay. I was doing a class, but I took clay and the class was for indigenous people. And then I put a fish on the inside of the clay. I made the clay, casket, and then I put it into the fire on this, and it was the perfect shape.
We really had to have a nice long terry cloth pot.
Yeah, terry cloth. They had terry cloth. It's very interesting because a lot of people remember reading, most women burned to death on the hearth and the clothing and so on. How many of you driving here today remember to put your signal on or thought about it? You just put it on. You didn't think about it. So by putting it, you just was automatic reflex. When children, especially girls, when they were able to walk, they were on the hearth. And they knew where that boundary was, and they knew where the fire was, and very few women. They did a study fairly recently that the thought process, there was a lot of women did not die from fire. I'm sure some did. My clothes every once in a while have spots of where a singe got on there. So fabrics were wool and linen, and it was a cross-woven fabric. It was called linsey woolsey. So on fabric, you have your warp, which are your threads that go this way, and then you have for threads that go. Remember the construction paper when we were kids, back and forth. That's your weft, and the weft goes weft to white, and in and out. One was linen, one was and it doesn't ignite as fast as just, you know, one of the fibers. Any ideas? You and I are gonna chat later. For skewering meat, again, you had very little meat during this time period. It was fairly, you know, and you would put this by the fire on the hearth, on the floor, and it would roast the meat. This item I plan on using in the very near future. Looks like a little trident. That was a clue. Yeah. For stabbing eels. or frogs.
Wow.
It's called a gig. But these were common items that would have been in an average household, especially in this area. You have a lot of wetlands and you have like little pond areas. So there's all eels in these wetlands here. So you would have had a gig, you know, and used it. A lot of these areas are close to water and you have streams, especially here on Long Island. So you would have had a great deal of mills. So as wheat's being grown, you need mills. So a mill is when you have two stones with grooves in it and they work in opposite direction. Usually there's water that's moving this. But if you live someplace where you didn't have water, you might have a grinding stone that you could grind your wheat. You can try all this out later.
So that is a stone.
Yeah, if I pick it up, it's gonna make a mess. But there's two stones, the grooves are in opposite direction. You can try it. So it grinds it, then you have to go the other way. And this became the daily grind. It takes 7 to 8 cups of flour to make 1 loaf of bread. Your food, we don't think of food the same way now, but most of your food was bread. Yes.
And was there a point, I realize you could say that, you know, people, the traveling wasn't so easy. But what about, like, we have these mills and things here?
They're all over the place.
Was anybody able to go buy it pre-milled already? I mean,
Yeah.
is that-
Yeah, the farmer would bring his, I thought I had, yeah, you would bring your wheat there and there would be a bag and you would trade and so on. But it was very interesting that the miller would mill it, and actually they would put some grit in there. He would take like a portion for himself, the good stuff, and then he would put something bad, like oyster shells, other items into that mixture for the weight. Yeah, and he took the good stuff off the top.
So that people would know maybe, and then
They wouldn't know because it would be mixed in. I mean, I took a 5-pound bag of flour and I put something you would never know if it was ground equally into it. So, and there was bartering and trading and going on. I mean, you didn't have all your products, like you were in charge of all your products. So, moving into the 1700s. So this is kind of like the 1600s. The 1700s are probably most of your historic homes here. Somebody help me with the date of the
16 something right on the road here, 16.
1680, the beginning of the 1700s. So like, again, all of these items, but what was hot on the scene back then was, you didn't know what's in here? Sugar. All right, it was in these really hard cones. Who shops at Marshall's? TJ Maxx. Decorator, votive candles, with sugar molds. So they use them as decorator pieces. This is a reproduction, but they're sugar molds, and that's what makes these cones. So things that you're buying in your decorating stores, that was your cone sugar. They had,
Like in Latin America, if you buy Pinel,
it's that cone,
jaggery,
right?
in
And
a cone.
then you would have something called nippers, and you would break pieces off. These little scissor, like, then there was little hammers and little things, and they would, yeah.
Get this hard sugar.
Wouldn't be white like this.
Wow.
It's hard. And they would come in big, little, they would be sold by pieces would be broken off. There were sugar safes because it was so valuable. There were spices that were kept in safes that the help couldn't get to it. It also protected it against insects and critters. How many of you have a beautiful wooden bowl? What kind of bowl is it?
What's my mom?
No, salad bowl?
For
It's on that
chopping.
Saluna.
Eggs are chopped. Eggplant.
Anybody know what this is?
Butter churn.
It's a butter churn. It's a small one, but it's a butter churn. The average cow produces 7 to 9 gallons of milk in the spring. That's a lot of milk per day, per day. So there's no grocery stores. You have to do something with this. There's no ice. There's ice houses, which we're going to talk about food preservation in a few seconds. These are butter bowls. So when you make butter, everybody remembers that jar with the marble and you go back and forth with heavy cream and you get butter in 15 minutes. Well, what happens is when you do butter in a butter churn, you're separating the fats from the liquid, you get your buttermilk. But that fat, that glob of fat, that really yummy stuff, goes into the bowl. And you take a spoon like this, and now what causes butter to go bad is the fact that you haven't washed it. When you make butter at home, it has to be washed 2 or 3 times. So the fat goes in here, the back of the spoon, and you start smearing it up and down and letting cold water run off of it, and it gets the rest of that buttermilk out. And when that happens, you don't have to put it in the cold anymore. There's no refrigeration. You could put a little salt in there and you can leave it out on your counter. But these are butter bowls for making butter. So now, well, yeah,
I noticed in France, when I was there, some people, they never put their butter in the refrigerator.
no, because it's been cleaned so many times, that buttermilk is gone, it's not gonna spoil. I mean, eventually it will spoil, but it won't spoil. Any questions so far? I feel this is like the Stony Brook crowd. Oh, boy. It was a while back. I'm also the director of the Town of Brookhaven Longwood Estate. And as a child, my parents took me from every historic home from Nova Scotia to Key West to, I think, New Orleans and up through Tennessee and so on. So there was that kind of beginning education. And then being the director, somebody suggested that I meet Dr. Alice Ross. And she had her studio in Smithtown. You knew her? She's passed a couple of years now. She moved out west. And I started taking lessons with Alice. And as she got older, I was in the back seat, then I kind of moved forward a little bit. And then before she retired, I was able to purchase some of her equipment. And then I continued on. And her parting words were, read everything that you can possibly read. So my bed has books in it, the car. You can't believe what I learned on Google while I'm driving. So this pot in particular, this is from the 1700s, and this was Alice's. I have 2 of her spider. These are spider pots. And spiders are that you can build a fire in your firebox, and you could put a fire, like a pile of coals over here. And I could cook here. So when I cook, I could have several fires, little fires going. And because my pots are up high, I can put coals underneath of them. And I could actually have several dishes going at the same. So that was Alice's pot. So that one. I have the 2 that I mentioned. And I'm afraid something's going to happen. So I was telling Darren that one's almost paper thin. And about 4 years ago, I went to a blacksmith asking could reproduce these pots because I bang them around a lot, use them. And there, I got an email 2 days ago. He goes, your pots are ready, like 4 years later.
To make those pots.
I was like, who is this? It was, yeah, it's been an adventure. So I just kind of keep going with it. So you might ask that one question that I don't know the answer to, and that will be a whole new adventure for me. And then the best part is, you may know what the best part of this whole thing for me is? Can you figure it out?
Yeah.
Well, believe it or not, I
Fair
eat
enough.
very little of what I. So this is not the one, but it's close. So this is a little waffle iron. So Alice had one, it was kind of octagon shape, and I don't know why, but she threw it out. I mean, I'm assuming she threw it out, it was in a pile and I grabbed it and she goes, oh, it's no good anymore. And maybe 20 years, maybe 15 years later, I was like, that's really cool. I should really learn how to use that. So I learned how to kind of use it, not so good, but it was a little waffle iron. But then the door of research opened and when it began. So then, God bless you. I got these. Oh, I have like 15 now. I'm a little compulsive. Okay, so I have these waffle irons and I tried using them and I was not successful. This is not a hobby that you just go, oh, I could do this because I am a good cook. You have to learn how to do it. So I built a fire and I decided I was going to be determined to learn how to make waffles with my waffle iron. So it took me a good, probably a couple hours. The key when making waffles is, it's only one key, is when you put the butter on, it has to dance, meaning that it's so hot that it just kind of like dances, and then you can make a really good waffle. So I had this kind of compulsion with waffles, and I bought little waffle irons, and I'm doing research. Then I found this one, bless you. Then I found this one. Yeah. Ah. So I'm doing the research and I find out that the only other one that I've been able to find is owned by Mount Vernon and it was Martha Washington's. So next month I'm going down to see their kitchen collection and see if it is the exact same one. And then we'll go into the who made it. So but the items are museum pieces, but if you look very carefully, you can see the crumbs where I didn't clean it so good from the last time I used it. But I use everything. So the best part of what I do is I get to share that. That's my, whatever it is, I get to share it. So we're not sharing waffles though, not tonight. So waffles are the beginning of communion wafers. So if you Google communion wafers and waffles together, you're going to find there's plates with religious symbols in them. I think it was 3 nuns in Pennsylvania that started with making communion wafers. And wafers and waffles in colonial times kind of go together at that same time period. Interesting. So anybody have idea what this is?
Wait.
I'm looking on the chairs. Somebody have a dial on one of the, oh, you do? You do, hold it up. Thank you. This is from barbecue. And this are the same item. This controls your heat. This controls the heat. I can move this up and I can move it down. And the pot, and my pots go higher or lower and I control the heat on my pots. So the pot is hanging over the fire. And if I need a hard boil, I move it down or I move it back up again. So this is my temperature control.
amount of strength to be able to cook a couple of 100 years ago. I mean, these are heavy items.
Oh, these are very heavy items. I said in my next life is gonna be butterflies and cotton balls. Yeah, are heavy. This would be stationary. It would be on a lug pole underneath. They would take green wood and jam it up. And this would be hanging from there if there wasn't a permanent structure within the hearth, the firebox. And this is a very small one. So that, yes, you had to be. Now, any of these pots, my big pots, when they're filled with liquid or meat or, they're really heavy. The average lifespan of a woman was 33 years of age.
Bring that water from the well or from wherever.
Mhm.
It wasn't like.
Oh, no, everything was, but a woman's, yes. Oh. Yeah, I know. I don't have no idea where I was.
I think you know, everything a woman had to do from scratch.
Well, she had to do it from scale. I know what it was. Okay, but she wasn't running soccer practice and whatever. She got up and she was in the kitchen. That was it. I mean, that was her task, was that little world around her. It wasn't like now we multitask beyond, and then we hire people to do this stuff, cook for us and clean for us and so on. So, all right, your question. Tremel, yes.
Did they wear gloves to protect themselves? Because I assume it got hot.
Aprons. Aprons, I'm assuming they had rags, but rags would have been very, not like we use somebody said terry cloth over here. Fabric wasn't a disposable item like we have now. Think about it. You had to get the sheep, you had to shear it, you had to clean it, card it, make the, whatever, spin it. Then you had to weave it into fabric. You weren't making towels because, it was for clothing. That's called a crane. Now, the crane came a little bit later in time period, and that wouldn't hold, this is called a Tremel. I'm sorry, I didn't tell you that. So the Tremel could not be hooked on a crane because you had that triangular piece. What we're talking about is that angle that kind of comes in and out of the fire. So before that was a permanent or a semi structure that it kind of looked like this. It looked like that. And it was probably a little bit higher than this, but this is what your pots would hang from. So the crane that you're talking about, that arm that swung in and out was a replacement for this. That was the evolution of this. This was on a pole and it was hung, hook or something, and then your pots were here. So, I mean, I guess you could rig it up on a crane, but it wasn't, not normal. I'm taking this off.
You think women had more than one,
Item?
than one
Oh,
of the- yeah,
absolutely.
they did.
Absolutely.
What you were saying, the spider and.
So, I'm also the historic cook at the Catchem Inn. If anybody, there's, the address is on the paperwork in the back, but you can come see my kitchen. I mean, I have like, Tremels, I probably have about 4 or 5 different sizes, different shapes and so on. Like, how many pots do you have in your kitchen? How many different
Used or not?
spoons?
Or
That's a
yeah.
different story. So these items probably evolved, out of necessity, like anything else, like these items here. Yeah, what are these babies? This was an Alice Ross thing. So anybody know what like a Dutch oven is? It's a square little squatty pot. It's got little square, triangular handles on it. They're called pig ears. And then the lid has a little lip on it. That's where you put your coal. So you could actually cook from underneath and on top. That's what makes it a Dutch oven. But once it's in the fire, how do you get it out? You hook these onto those little those little triangular pieces, and now you have a handle. Now, when they're filled, I have to kind of go in like this, straight up like that, because it has coals on top. This is for a very small pot, but I have very large ones. And you're maneuvering a lot of weight that's very, very hot. If I touch metal, I'm always, I don't get burnt that much these days, but the average person cooking would just kind of know where to hit it. These handles on the spider, these hollow ones, the heat dissipates from here to here. That's why they're hot. You'll see these cone-shaped handles on a lot of older pieces, because it allows you to kind of lift the pot a little bit easier without getting burnt. Okay, moving along. George Washington, late 1700s. Okay, would have had this in his tent. He would have been able to cook on this. This is basically a hibachi. It's called a brazier. You put your coals in here and your pot on top of here.
I always read about braziers in books. I
You
never knew
do.
what they were.
Sometimes they're square. This is a very fancy little one. The coals go in, and then there's an item on top that allows you to cook, but it's basically a little hibachi. So that's what a brazier is. Anybody ever have other terms that you're reading? Pardon me?
Brazier, they do with braids.
Brazier. People ask me when I cook, how do you like bake? How do you like roast things? If I'm not putting it in one pot, I have these tin ovens. Sorry, I have allergies and I have that really dry cough. It's not like a cold or yucky stuff. So you put your meat in here. Darren, I'm coming undone here. Okay. So you put your roast in here, it goes on this spit, and if I turn it, can everybody see those holes on the spit? Again, you can always come up and look. If you were to put a chicken's hollow, it would just spin. So these long spikes kind of go through the chicken or the meat, and it keeps it from spinning. So the ones that I use actually have little holes, so I can set it like every half hour. I can just move it and turn it around. And that's how I would cook meat or chicken. I'm sorry?
Done to a turn.
Yeah, done to a turn. It's funny, all these old sayings, people don't realize, like, pothole, the daily grind, and so on. Who has the pudding? Anybody have the pudding thing? Pudding, Jello pudding. Okay, do you think it's anything to do with this? I don't know if I can hold, thank you. Sausage. We all have this in the cabinet, top shelf. The idea you're gonna make it, you never do. I wouldn't check the date on this. Sausage. Haggis. Wait a second. They're all puddings. Hot dogs. Kibasi. They're all puddings. They're meats stuffed in a skin and then cooked or boiled. So stomachs and intestines were used to stuff all these meats, sausages, and they were called puddings. But how do we get from the sausage to Jello? To snack packs. What did you do when you ran out of intestines?
Oh, it's a horror. It's a horror. I don't know what I would do. See,
I really,
I-
seriously, the drama. You're close. All those books that you're reading. Boiling cloths.
Oh,
You ran out of those items to the stomachs and the intestines. So you were women, you're clever. You're gonna figure out some way of boiling whatever it is. So you had a piece of fabric that you weren't using as a towel. And you put your item, your food product in there, and you boiled it. It became a boiling cloth. So you can try this. I just made it this morning. Here's the pudding. Boiled pudding. So went from sausage, now you run out of meat. Now you're gonna put some grains in there. And then the grains eventually take the place of the meat, and through evolution, then the sweets come, the sweet meats, which are your fruits that have been kind of candied. And now you have figgy pudding. And you have the puddings,
Which is fair, like, and I remember doing something like.
red
there-
puddings and
Yes,
then,
For Christmas.
right.
You could buy something that actually came in a. came with-
and a tip. Okay, so now you have those boiled puddings. So now the meat product is over here, and now we have more of the bread products. They're all puddings. So when you're reading those recipes and you see the word pudding, you have to look because all of a sudden you could be making a sausage thinking that you're gonna have like a cake. So, all right. During this time period, bread is a really important item. Bread is not wasted, even if it's green and moldy. All right, you're gonna eat the bread. So I began doing this and I'm doing research and I thought, of course, I need a bread, grater. All right, and it has a nice straw because I'm gonna do that because my mother saves every bit of bread because she makes breadcrumbs. So this is logical, but I'm wrong. I'm caught on something, I can feel it. All right. Okay, it's not for bread. Anybody have an idea?
Back to that.
What? Cheese. Cheese. Cow produces how much milk? 7 to 9 gallons, okay? You have your soft cheeses, then this is why cheese is expensive. Your soft cheeses are cheap. Summer cheeses. As the time goes on, it needs to cure. Now it's sitting on a shelf, you're turning it, it takes labor, price goes up. Your medium cheeses, like your cheddars, your things like that. And then months later, you have your Parmesan cheese. You have your hard cheese. Yeah, there you go. You have your hard cheese. Those big grating boxes were for cheese because now it's winter time. You live in one of these houses, 1700s, you run out of meat. There's your protein, your cheese, because now you've had your cheese. So again, things that we think are just generic things, there's a story behind it, and so on.
Oh, wait, so wait, how would you eat green and moldy bread? How would you repurpose that?
We ate it,
You ate it.
tasted good.
You would add it into your one pot.
Okay.
You would,
Like-
a gruel, it just get added in. I mean, our instincts would be to scrape it off at least, but nothing was wasted. A little bit earlier before dinnerware was, we were accustomed, bread was used as a plate. As a plate. There's reports, people would, children wouldn't be at the table, they would stand. You would just take your bread and kind of like pull it into the mush, and the gruel and so on, and you would just eat it on the bread, but nothing was wasted. So, and because we were in a time period where the water was really foul, not so good now, but anyway, what would you drink? Beer or hard cider or cider or mead or any of those. Mead wasn't really, I don't think, a big like everyday drink. Everybody every day drank beer. I think it was only 4% alcohol, but it's still a little boozy. People probably walk a little crooked. If I drank one beer, I'd be like all crooked. But beer was the liquid of choice. So they didn't drink milk like we drink milk and so on. All right, moving along. Coffee, hot chocolate, tea. Colonial women drank hot chocolate. Anybody know what the hot and hot chocolate means?
Right.
You said spice, cayenne and chili. All right, I just did a whole program on it and people added that in. Chocolate pots. They were Somebody has that weird, oh, there it is. This is a dasher. It's a really bad one, but it's a dasher. These pots were very tall because they would take this, and they would twist it to make it frothy. Martha Washington liked this, and she would have this as a breakfast drink in the morning. So again, in the 1700s. Coffee would have been roasted in an item like this. The coffee beans would have been put in here. The coals would have been in here. And somebody would have to, for about 20 minutes, roast the coffee. And there's all different kinds of these items. I mean, I don't have, how many roasters could you possibly use? I don't know, how are we doing on time?
Perfect.
How we are?
15 minutes.
15 minutes? Okay. Teapots. We all know about the Boston Tea Party, right? So that's a whole political whatever. We have enough of that. So these are two teas that I brought. You're welcome to try both. One is a bohea tea, one is a hasten tea. It's said that George, meaning Washington, preferred this one. This particular tea, there was over 70 chests thrown overboard during the protest. The bohea tea, which is this tea, and you can try, this was 242 chests. And we think of tea as like tea bags or tea boxes or whatever. They were bricks of tea. They were kind of probably about this big, flat bricks of tea. And that was kind of the protest. But you could try both of these teas. They're both hot. Just take a little bit. The bohea tea is really very
They
strong.
own the bricks for the tea, like what kept that? You know, I mean, like,
Top shelf of your freezer, your cream spinach. Spinach is a leaf. They would probably just force it into a mold and extract the fluid. It would just be like really probably pressed. I mean, that me looking into it. Unless I know specifically, I'm not gonna give you I'm not gonna wing the answer because I don't think in history, a lot of people make that mistake. They do oral history or they think that it should be, and it's inappropriate. So, but I think it would be like they do with spinach. They kind of get all the moisture out and then make it into a brick. That would be my conclusion.
and that's probably how they sold it, by the weight of whatever.
They said one brick would last somebody over a year of just breaking little pieces off to make tea. I just read that recently. The bohea tea has a smoky taste, a very smoky taste to it and an aroma. Before it was shipped, they couldn't grow it fast enough and ship it without spoiling. So they smoked it as a preservation, probably. So you're gonna smell that when you taste this. So just take a little bit because it's rather strong. And this is just a green tea, a specific green tea. So this part of the table, 1700s. What happens in the 1800s? Dun, dun, dun. What happens? The Industrial Revolution. So wood is no longer the fuel source. What is the fuel source? Coal. Got it out of my Christmas stuff. Coal. And coal was being used in what? The hearth? Furnaces, but we're talking about cooking. The big cast iron stoves.
Potbelly.
Those potbelly stoves. The potbelly stoves were very tall, those flat top stoves. That's what was really being used for cooking. The coal, and then we see like 1840, between 1840, 1860, those big cast iron stoves are really coming into vogue. A lot of people have them and so on. And then a short time after that, we have gas and electricity, and then it kind of pretty much stays the same from then on. And then we had what? What was the next kind of thing in, two more things. Microwaves, because if you stand next to it, you're gonna die. Right? And now we have a induction, but there's something else. Nope. Gas, air fryers. That's our new thing. I don't use any of that. Anyhow. Somebody has a piece of, oh, Darren has it by his plate. Hold this.
The beater?
Just hold, no, just hold that. Thank you.
Oh, that's part of- okay, that's right.
See all those gears? To peel the apple.
It's a lot of work.
That's a lot of work because now we're in the height of invention. Look at that. Yeah, that's all I could say. That is crazy to peel the apple. All right, so it shows this time of growth. We're no longer simple working things. Now we're putting gadgets and wheels and all sorts of baubles just to peel an apple. Apples during colonial times were really important. It was a main source of food. You could keep them for a long period of time. You could make, you know, the ciders and so on. Really important. Another item, besides a stick. No, yes, sir, good. What are we making? A lot of oatmeal, gruel. You make oatmeal on a spoon, it collects. This, I love saying this, it's called a spurtle.
A spurtle.
It's a spurtle. So when you see the word spurtle, I know you're trying to process this whole,
I make porridge all the time. I need that.
well, all I can say is thank God for Google. Cast iron stoves. I have a couple different styles of this. I knew it had something to do with cooking, so I bought it. It took me a while to figure it out. To take the pie plates out of the cast iron. What?
No, I bake a lot, so I'm getting one of those.
There's actually,
Have it.
there's an easier one. I personally thought it was gynecology too. So anyway, Frisbees, pie plates. That's how that whole thing started. Frisbees were 1871 at Yale. I write notes to myself on items so I could. But yeah, and it was in 1947 at Woolworth and by 1950, the Frisbee, but it all came because of pie plate.
That's a very fancy pie plate.
Isn't it? I don't use it. That's why I wrote on this one, so I don't use it for cooking. But I do use the metal ones. I actually prefer them than the glass. So the 1800s, 1800s, and then it was one more time period. Yeah, we could all relate, right? What happened? Tang. What does Tang represent? Space age. During this time period, right before that, we have bird's eye, transporting food on railroad. Important because we are no longer here. We're moving around. Automobiles, you're moving around. There was an automobile, I think it was Ford, I can't swear to that. But they actually marketed the picnic basket because now you could take your food with you as you drive.
I'm just gonna, two books, whether you have read them or not, and maybe everybody else. Marjorie Morning Weather Post met Mr. Birdseye, and she's the one who actually, he was like keeping things frozen, and that's when she bought his company was when.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And of course, it had to be a woman.
Book that I also, so that's the husbands of, you read that book, what's that? No, it was about Margaret, Mary was great book about. And then I finished reading the man who ate them up, and it's James Beard. And he and his mother in 1905 take a train from Oregon, and they go into Astoria, and the mother brings a cooked ham with her. That's going to be the food they're going to eat when they first get to their summer. and she carves off, like she has to carve the
Right.
molds and everything, and she has it wrapped, and it's this heavy ham, and it's just an incredible, there was no picnic tables,
It
there
was
was no ice,
salted,
there was no, you know,
right?
how,
People started moving around and preserve food. So in preservation of food. Well, we have ice. Big blocks of ice were delivered to ice boxes and so on with these big little ones.
I was a child, I saw
This, right? And they packed it with hay. Then the ice box came. Again, this evolution in food, we can now preserve it, we can keep it, we can have more. But what happened to women? We started moving around a little bit more now because we started working. I'm gonna really kick that person's behind. Canned foods. Who's responsible for canned foods?
Civil War.
Nope.
No, it's the Atlantic.
I'll give you a clue. Really short dude kept his hand in his jacket.
Napoleon.
Napoleon. Okay, Napoleon. He wanted to feed his troops. Okay, so they came up with this canned idea, except it was lead, so it kind of was a little problem. Right, it was problematic. And then the key on top, that was the next big thing, is that key. Spam still has a key.
You can cut your finger off with that.
I'm looking at the date of this because I put this in there for a while ago. I would not eat this. 1810, not 1810, but spam, yeah, it's probably, but anyway, but that key. But again, this is evolution as far as, you know, we don't think about food, about any of this. Hog splatter. Hog splatter, who knew? Hog splatter. Hog splatter. Wax linen. Potted meat, the wax linen seals it. I mean, there's a few more steps. Tupperware. Hog splatter. Tupperware.
So you mean to say they actually marketed hog splatter, that you could use to put your food in?
You would get, you were in this rural area. There was a pig farmer right down the road, but hog splatter, as it dries, it tightens. So if you put that over a ceramic container, so when you see potted meat, you take the meat, you grind it up, you put it in, and then you would put some kind of fat on top of it, and then you would cover it with hog splatter or wax linen, and that became your, like your saran wrap, your wax paper on top of it. And now you can get this waxed wrap for $8, and there's only 3 pieces in here. So time is moving along. We're moving around. We have men going to the moon. TV dinners. Big, huge in the timeline of food. Really, 1954. I think that everybody in this room can relate to this. The snack tables that if you hit them, they just take off on you. And my son still says, "What is a clicker?" Right? We all know that. We can relate, except for Darren. And then McDonald's. And why? Because we're happy. And we can get happy meals and happy boxes because we are on the run now. Now we are moving along and we can get meals in here. But the pendulum is not doing this. Watch, it's doing this. I had some homeschool moms came in and they were like, "We're making bread." I'm like, they've been doing that for thousands of years. It's good. But they're aware that you can make bread now. It takes time. Forgot to tell you the story. The bread, it goes into the hearth. So we're looking at communities that have probably a baker, somebody doing pottery, blah, blah, blah. Bread. You go to the baker to get your bread. You're the head of the manor, and you want your bread. And he takes the bread out, but it's been cooked on the hearth. So the bottom is like really tough. And he cuts that off to give you your bread. And he gives you the upper crust. Dun, dun. The best is the thing. So think about that, how we even just interpret people, the upper crust, white collar versus blue collar.
But dirty color, the blue is the high return.
Well, the white, the energy that it took to keep fabric white was crazy. So all of these things are all related, except for one thing here. And if you're all in that kind of historics, you might dress like this. Never, ever.
Where
Exclamation point. No, I have a bonnet over there. I thought I had it. Oh, here it is. It's rather cute. I don't particularly care for it. Oh, no. Your hair has lice,
Oh,
fleas. You almost never wash it. It's probably to keep the bugs out of everything and keep them contained. But never, ever, you ladies in historics, put one of these on. These mop hats, it's incorrect on so many levels. So this is incorrect. This is correct. This were the bands here. I've seen so many historics, they put these on. Downton Abbey, maybe. That's it. This, it's gonna be used as a rag. It's incorrect. It's incorrect on so many levels. Somewhere, Darren and I were talking about this. Somewhere along this, what I was saying about history. I'm not going to tell you something I don't know is pretty much drop dead, because I was doing research about I did a whole thing on the first Thanksgiving, and somebody was like, "Oh, they have lobster." They didn't have lobster. I called Jamestown. I'm going right to the source. I'm like, "Hello, this is Diane from Long Island, blah, blah, blah." Lobsters 150 feet out, colonial people wearing wool in the middle of winter, okay, inland. They're not going for lobster. We live on Long Island. How many of you have ever seen a lobster just kind of strolling along on the beach? They don't come inland. And colonial people didn't swim. So for all of those reasons, they didn't have lobster. They probably had crabs and, the clams and steamers and all that other stuff, but no lobsters. And then somebody wrote somewhere, the lobsters were piled so high. I haven't seen one in 64 years on the beach, let alone a whole pile of lobsters congregating. But somebody writes something along the way and we believe it. Pilgrims didn't have those white collars with the little hats and whatever, but we believe it. I'm not even going into Easter bunnies, but in history, it is imperative that if I'm telling a story about this, and I'm not always right, and there's always that gray area, but you really, really, because the person walking into your historic facility or listening to this lecture is going to bank on what I'm saying someplace along the way. So it's really, and I catch people all the time making these kind of assumptions about history, and it's kind of not so cool. So I'm going to conclude with just a few things. This is the peel, not for pizza. It's for moving my coal around so I can move my coals all over that hearth to create my dinner. This is a very small one. Whoever used this is probably early 17. You see that little, used it a lot. But it's a nice little one that fits in my car. Also, if you're buying antiques, know your items. I thought this was a drip pan. It is not. It's called a grisset. A grisset. And it goes with this item. Anybody know what that is? Looks like candle holder. All right, so they had candles. They would have been made out of fat or something kind of smelly. And it would give you the lights somewhere on a chair. There's a birthday candle. That's about how much light you're gonna get from this. But this also has this little pincher on top. See, can everybody see that?
Center is the princess.
Right, it would hold some reeds or rush, and that's where the rush light is. But the rush, which is plant material that's dried, would have to be dragged through animal fat, the gristle, grisset. Okay, through there, and then it would dry, and then they would light that plant material that is dipped in fat, and that would give you light. So this is a rush light. Yeah, but this was an expensive lesson.
So how many of these items would the typical colonial woman have in her kitchen? And how would she get them?
Through
Or-
time, the trading,
Would she get them like when people got married, did they give them as wedding?
waffle iron, Martha
Like a
Washington.
trousseau or something?
Yeah, and I think you would probably, and again, and this is only an assumption, you would gather things as you went along. Somebody died, your neighbor, you got something, from their estate. Everybody would have had some kind of lighting. So they may not have had this lighting, but they might have had something else. And then when that came along, I mean, it's like all of us with our things too. They may not have had a grisset, but they may have had a drip pan. I just happened to have what I thought was right. So this particular item, very expensive lesson. I went out to Southold. This man was selling some antiques, yada, yada, yada. I was going to bundle because I see that on TV, bundle, make a pile, make an offer. So yeah. So the old geezer comes out of the house and he's like 90 years old and he was playing me and I knew it. And I was like doing the whole, but it's going to be used for educational. I played the girl card, the whole 9 yards. And he goes in and he brings this out. And he goes, I bet you don't know what this is. And he said it with such arrogance. I was like, of course I know what it is. It's a rush lamp. And at that moment, he knew I had everything in that pile. He knew I knew the value of it. He baited me. Busted. That was an $800 lesson. Yeah, that was.
It's a great story it comes with.
Oh, but he was like so old. I played the oh, we use this for children's programs, that whole,
Why did he have that?
I think he was an antique dealer at one time, and I think a lot of the pieces came out of a museum because I found acquisition numbers on them. So either that or he stole them. I don't know. I'm going with the fact that there was a museum out there that whatever. A lot of these antique dealers, they'll do that and they'll buy all this stuff and so on, which then leads me to my last item. Because it has an acquisition number on it. I was just gifted. So that's how another way I get these items. And I hit my parents up every holiday. During the 90s, I have to really make a really big list quick. What is it? It is called a salamander. Any cooks in the audience?
Yeah, that's a restaurant,
Ah,
salamander.
okay, so what does it do?
Salamander's a broiler with the heat on the top,
For,
steaks. Or
this can actually cook from both sides, but this is only one side. But the broiler is for creme brulee, which is not an item. It's actually the process, which I didn't know up until recently, until I got this when I was doing research. So this plate goes into the fire until it gets red hot, like red, like seriously, it turns red. And then it goes over the rice pudding or whatever you're serving, and it gives that beautiful golden, and that sugar starts to caramel.
You
And
need to have all your plates and your wares have to have that size so it can just sit on it.
no, it doesn't, because look what I learned. So there, I'm browning that, whatever that is, right? Watch. I put something underneath. And it pivots. It's balanced just at that point that I can move it closer, or, I mean, this is really heavy, but it's pivoted right at that point where it's going to allow me to do whatever I want to do.
Poles generally are on the floor.
They're always on the floor.
So this is a contraption for getting my heat on top.
No. There's the fire. I shove this in there. Then I put whatever underneath of it. I'm not,
So
I'm,
it's the- to get the heat source on top of the.
oh, on
food,
top of the food,
as
yes.
opposed to ordinarily.
Only
the
browning. This is
whole-
only used for browning.
Right,
That's
but you
it.
can Put the heat on top as opposed. to
On the
underneath.
food item, yes. Yeah. So this is only used for browning. Does anybody want to see how heavy this is?
Like a big lollipop.
So the salad, that's my newest acquisition. I have Colonial Times rice was introduced. I have a rice bag over here, down in the Carolinas. Anybody ever notice when you buy rice, Carolina? Because it was grown here in the United States in 1700s. So we have rice, we have sugar. Anybody know a connection, what these two items are connected with? Slavery, yep, slavery. So, so the rice, yeah. So what I did is to demonstrate I did not do this on the hearth, but I have a rice pudding that has been browned on top. And the recipe is from Mary. Does anybody know who William Floyd was? He was a signer of the Declaration of Independence in Center Ridge. I mean, he lives in Shirley, lived in Shirley. He married his daughter, Mary Floyd, married Benjamin Talmadge, who was the spy for George Washington. And I have their I have a copy of their cookbook. So I made a rice pudding from her cookbook. So we're going to try that if you would like. So I think I've spoken about every single item here. We're going to try the cheese, the bread, the boiled pudding, if you wish, the tea, and the rice pudding. Ah. Toilet paper, big thing during the pandemic. People will call me, you need toilet paper like that.
Go to Cuba,
Um,
they bring you on toilet paper, carry it with you.
So during the pandemic, people are calling me asking if I want me to pick up toilet paper. I'm like, I'm good. I know how to make it. Toilet paper. Hygiene during this time period, non-existent, not to the point where we would be comfortable today. I bring toilet paper just to kind of like, with all of these items, you know, cleanliness and so on, it just kind of, you know, brings us to this modern day. My outfit, you asked about using, you know, towels or hot holders. These, what do you call it, aprons, were used all the time. They were not hung like this, they were hung like this. And it was also to keep it, because look how flowy that is. If I step into the flame, it's going to catch. So by keeping it tucked in, it allows it to not flow forward into the flame. It also allows me double layers to pick things up and pockets and so on. My outfit would have had 2 or 3 layers of skirting. These are not skirts, they're petticoats. Petticoats are not bloomers that you have underneath, they didn't exist. This is a petticoat, and I might have had 2 or 3 layers of petticoats on, quilted, unquilted, wool, and so on. I have socks on that would have went up to my thigh. Those are clock socks, meaning that it has a design on it. My shoes are very late 16, early 1700s. They're the colonial shoes with the very thick soles and that kind of buckle. They're very heavy and they're very slippery on modern floors. So I try to stay with these. Underneath my whole outfit, I'm pinned in. There are no zippers, there's no buttons. I just have straight pins that are holding my outfit on. And underneath everything, I do have a corset. I'm wired. I do have a jump on. It's not a full corset, but it is a jump. And then underneath that, I have this white nightgown. That's all linen underneath that. And that's a chemise or shift. And that's underneath my whole outfit. So then what about my undergarments? What's underneath all that?
No panties. Straps.
Nothing.
Nothing, no.
Commando, yes.
There's a question online, not about this recent topic. There's a question, do you know if any of this equipment is still being used today, perhaps in other countries?
Ooh. Other countries, maybe. United States, I'd probably be very doubtful. I do use, I would say 95% of this. But as far as, I'm just looking. No,
With the Amish still?
that's what I'm saying. Without doing research, I wouldn't know exactly. I'm sure they're doing one pot, doing pots and things like that. They might still be using like wax linen and crocks for pickling and things like that. But I really don't know.
First of all, Diane, wonderful presentation.
Oh, thank you.
Very, very.
I guess I'm done.
You know, there's a direct link between the village of Roslyn, George Washington, and cooking.
No.
On his tour of Long Island, on the last day, April 24th, 1790, George Washington had breakfast about a quarter of a mile from here.
Did he have waffles?
And you don't know what he ate. He met the owner of the Roslyn Gristmill,
Okay.
Hendrik Underdon. He had breakfast.
I know.
He was well entertained. And that's where we are directly related to George Washington and cooking. And his house still exists today and now is a restaurant.
Really? So fine. So anybody willing to do research? Because I can't keep up with the amount of research. See if you can find out what was served.
He didn't say.
Dried clams. Oh, fried clams. They would have been done in a spider. They would have been done in a spider like that. Fried clams. That's where whoever's involved in that group, you hire me to create that. No, I'm serious. That, because what I do is I do all the research, or as much as I can, and then I create it, that actual meal. It's really good for a fundraiser, but it's also for educating exactly like who would think like fried clams for, for breakfast. It's a way of connecting. Food connects us. I do a whole presentation with the presidents, like modern presidents, they have these big dinners. They break bread with other countries. They break those barriers down with food. They're not sitting there, I mean, probably golf, but
Well, I think Howard, what you're saying is that there's a possibility that the Paul brothers who own Hendrix would probably agree to have you do something in that building as a fundraiser.
Yes.
That would be.
maybe it's bringing attention to history and connecting it, because nobody really thinks about, or like hot chocolate. Nobody thinks about the word hot. It's spice, it's not temperature. But until somebody educates you and brings it to your taste buds, you don't realize it. You don't put it all together. And everything kind of like everything circles around with clothing and equipment and so on. So I am going to conclude. I'm going to wipe my hands and put gloves on. I am going to serve the rice pudding if anybody would like some. I'm going to cut up some the boiled pudding. I'm just going to ask everybody, you're all adults, please don't double dip, don't stick your fingers in stuff, don't lick your fingers. Be respectful if I'm not standing there, of the food items that are being, presented in front of you. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope I opened up your eyes a little bit. You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Taking the seat, so thank you.